Hi, I'm Chris Birch. I'm the founder and creative director of Modiphius Entertainment, which is a tabletop games company based here in London. I first got into games when I was 8, and I think my mum was sick of me hanging around the house and told my brother to take me off to a regular night he was doing with some friends where they were playing this game called Dungeons and Dragons. So they dragged me off and I died on the first night as a first level character, but obviously something hooked me and I was back every week and soon found love for that tabletop game. Found a game called Ogre, a little hex based war game in a knitting shop with my mum one weekend, and basically quickly became a kind of broadly into war games, into sort of fantasy board games and role playing games. Started a gaming society at college, and then fell into the music industry when I got to London, and I was organising big raves, a thing called Tribal Gathering, which was like 50,000 people in a field. We had big names like The Prodigy and the Chemical Brothers and Left Field and all sorts of people playing for us, and I was doing all the marketing and promotion and shouting at DJs at 9 a.m. in a field somewhere. So, but I'd always been a gamer, and with a good friend of mine, we wrote a game called Star Blazer Adventures, which was published by Cubicle 7 eventually, and spent our 20s dreaming up gaming universes as you do over pizzas and Diet Coke into the wee hours, and one of the universe actually was called Modiphius, which is how this company got our name. It was a kind of alien created solar system, and we always talked about starting a games company, so it seemed like a great name to start with. And so after I'd sort of worked in the music business, I started a video game clothing company called Joystick Junkies, which did all sorts of cool clothing like Atari and a lot of the Midway games like Defender and Space Invaders, etc. And after I'd been doing that for about 13 years, I met my wife Rita, and we were looking at, I was bored of the t-shirts, and had been doing all these things. I'd been doing PR for video games, I'd been selling clothing, doing marketing, doing lots of parties and events, and I was kind of like, didn't really know where I was going to go with all of that. And I kind of went back to what my childhood love was, which was tanks and soldiers and role-playing games and board games. And whilst I was doing the clothing company, I dreamed up this universe called Acton Cthulhu, which is basically the Nazis are trying to partner with ancient gods and demons to win the war, and the heroes heroes of the Allies are fighting a secret war to try and stop them. It was inspired by my childhood love for comics like Weird War and Sergeant Rock, which I would read avidly every weekend. I'd go and help my granddad in a bookstore in Coventry Indoor Market, and that kind of gave me this basis for demon-possessed tiger tanks and G.I. Joes fighting hordes of zombies. Then I discovered H.P. Lovecraft and the Mountains of Madness, which was a fantastic story about explorers discovering an ancient city in Antarctica, and then something sparked and I thought, what if there were Nazis there too? And so Acton Cthulhu was born, which was our first big universe, and that led to our first Kickstarter that launched Modiphius.
I say, chaps, I'm glad you could all make it. Now, I want to draw your attention to this poster we've had created. It's a bit of an artistic rendering of this chap called Cthulhu. He's been calling rather a bother for our chaps in the front line and the boffins back at home.
So how we started Modiphius was with a game called Acton Cthulhu that merged this sort of weird war and ancient gods and demons and all those kind of cool secret Nazi plots and technology. And it was our own baby, so we had this first Kickstarter that raised about 200,000, and kind of started the company because suddenly we went from going, well, this will give us a day a week's work to work on, to being, oh my god, we've got to start a company. And with that thought came, well, I can't just run a company with one project, we've got to start thinking about the future. And so we picked up another license, Mutant Chronicles, which, if you don't know, was a competitor to Games Workshop in the 90s, was this sort of epic far future universe by a Swedish games company called Target. And so we rebooted it with a new 3rd edition role-playing game and a line of miniatures the year after Acting Cthulhu with another Kickstarter. And the same company owned the rights to Conan, and so we got talking to them about that. And because we had just done 2 big projects, they agreed and let us take on the rights to Conan as well. And that also led to, at the same time, I was talking to ITV, who owned the rights to Thunderbirds, the old classic kids show I'd always been a fan of. So showed them what we were doing with Conan now and Mutant Chronicles and Acting Cthulhu, and they were impressed, and we pitched them the idea of a board game. I met Matt Leacock, of course, who was famous for Pandemic at the time, and pitched him the idea of a cooperative game. This is a bit like going after a movie director for your film, like, you know, if you want a good action movie, go after a great action movie director. So we thought who was best for a co-op game, and Matt was obviously number one choice. And he didn't know Thunderbirds, but he said, I'll go home and watch the shows with my kids. So we thought we'd probably hooked him, because as soon as the kids loved it, he would be in, and he was. So we had a great project with that, and it's little stepping stones. So, you know, Mutant Chronicles was a small stepping stone, an unknown IP that was pretty quiet, and we managed to reboot it and find a new audience through Kickstarter. Thunderbirds, you know, they were just starting to work on the new TV series that's been out by Weta Workshop, and so we were at a really good time that we could have such a big hit, and especially with a good board game name like Matt's, and then Conan hit, so that was our next big project. So I'd done a lot of licensing of video game properties for the clothing label Joystick Junkies I ran for about 13 years. So I knew a lot of the video games companies, I knew what they wanted to hear for the deals, and so it was relatively easy to get a lot of these licenses. So we went after, trying to think next, after Conan came Infinity, which we worked with on with Corvus Belli, because they had such a fantastic big miniatures range, and it was kind of screaming out to have a role-playing story. And all the while I'd been dreaming about some of the really big projects, and I got introduced to Star Trek, well, to CBS. I'd always been a Star Trek fan, having watched Captain Kirk rock around the universe as a kid. And found out that an old friend was now working with a company that was doing the Star Trek online game, and he introduced us to CBS. And over the course of about 2 years, we pitched them and cajoled them and eventually convinced them to give us the rights. But of course it was because we could show the quality of work that we did with Thunderbirds and with Conan and Acting Cthulhu, etc. So that was probably the big stepping stone for Modiphius, is taking on such a vast global brand like Star Trek. And it was it's a joy to work on. And the reason we do this stuff is, I could go and make more money elsewhere, but I've always wanted to work on the dream project. So I make a point of not working on games that I don't really love, because I know I'm going to have to work on a Saturday night or a Monday morning at 6 a.m. or Tuesday at midnight. It's as you run a business, you end up working crazy hours. So it better be something that I do care about, and I think that comes across in the quality of the games. So Star Trek happened, and we launched that to a big fanfare as a huge success. And then we used that work to then start talking to Bethesda. I knew them from working in clothing, and we were able to start talking to them about doing a tabletop game. And I pitched them, how about Fallout Warhammer? So and they were like, okay, why not? Sounds fun. And again, so that took about 2 years again to convince them that we could do a good product line, to show them what we wanted to do. Lawyers take a long time to do contracts, and I remember when finally the contract came through, a bit like Star Trek, I was like, wow, that's amazing how we've come so far. So and of course when we did the deal for Fallout, we started looking at Elder Scrolls and other games at the same time. So it's funny how all these little stepping stones and all things you've done before all kind of lead towards the big projects. So these big deals aren't that easy to pull off. As you can imagine, Star Trek didn't want to do it at the beginning. No! They were like, no, we haven't got the time, too small a team. It's too much work. Role-playing games are, so much work. So much work to approve because it's hundreds of pages of content that you've got to read. So we said, well, look, what if we hire someone extra for your team? And then I was worried, thinking, oh my gosh, well, what are we going to have to end up paying, for someone? And then we lucked out. We found someone, a games writer who was working with Simon & Schuster to edit the Star Trek books. And so we got him on board, and he knew the approvals team. And so we got him to, basically read everything, pre-approve it for us as part of the team. So, when we send in content, everything is correct. So the worst things we usually get pulled up on is we haven't italicized Enterprise.
But because the Romulans...
or something funny like that. So it's the hard work pays off, because you get a good working relationship, and they let you do more. Bethesda, I had contacts from when I was doing the clothing before. I remember speaking to one person, for a year, maybe 18 months, and not really getting far, and then they left. And of course, you're working on other projects at the time, so you forget about it for a month. You go, I wonder if I'll bug them again, and then eventually they got some new team members, new licensing manager in the UK, and we managed to meet up, and he helped push it through. So it's sometimes there's a right time for these deals to happen, and you've got to have the right answers. You've got to be serious. You can't go in offering a small bit of money. You've got to go in going, we're going to make a huge hit of this. This is going to be a big success, and here's the money to prove it. So it's and you've got to run those numbers and make sure that you really can deliver that kind of money, that you can make money as a business and pay the team, and because there's a vast number of people involved in miniature games. I mean, just doing Fallout and Elder Scrolls alone has doubled the size of Modiphius, because suddenly we need lots of 3D sculptors. We need a whole team to test and develop the games internally, just to get them out on time. We need more project managers. We need we needed a lot more time for getting stuff approved. We needed more play testers, and so it was. Oh yeah, and then also we started our own factory. We maxed out our a factory we were using for Fallout, and for Elder Scrolls we realised that we needed to get our own factories. So that's another 5 people in Cornwall that we've now got, which is great, and we've maxed them out as well. So it's amazing how suddenly you need a load more people, and you didn't realise it at the beginning. But that's how the company grows. Big universes come with their own challenges versus your own universe. With my own universe, I can create anything I want. Acting Cthulhu, we're just creating or adding to the storyline, creating some new adversaries, some new events in the timeline. It's complete freedom up to me. Different universes are a bit different. Star Trek actually embraces fan creation and partners creating new content. So in Star Trek, we've created the Shackleton Expanse, which is a big area of space that was an empty part of the map in the Star Trek universe, and we filled it in, and we've got a whole storyline building there in what you would call beta canon. So it's not alpha, it's not TV shows. I mean, basically, if it's TV shows, that's their kind of prime, or TV shows and films is their prime canon. That's what is official, and then anything beyond that, the beta canon can potentially conflict, although we aim for it not to. And they embrace us creating new worlds, new ships, new peoples. In a world like Fallout and Elder Scrolls, there's so much content. We actually don't need to really create anything. But we also have to be careful that, because they see anything that we put into the video game as prime, canon, or they don't want anything conflicting in any of their licensing. So we can't create a new vault, for example, in Fallout. We can create a vault with no name, and it's up to you to decide where it is and create a situation, a scenario. We can create a vault tech factory, for example, for a mission that you could place somewhere in the wasteland that you're wargaming in. But what we can't do is place that in a certain town, because what happens if the designers want to do a new DLC or a new game set in that area, and you've now created something there and it's kind of painted them into a corner that they now feel they have to use that. So in one sense it makes it easier to create for, because we have boundaries, we know that what we can and can't do. Whereas with Star Trek it's completely open. It still has to be approved, but as long as it fits the Star Trek universe, and we don't try and claim that we found a new race of heavily armoured space marines who live on a world and want to dominate everyone. Within reason, you can create anything you want that fits the style of the Star Trek universe. So with Elder Scrolls and Fallout, we need to be sensitive to the plans of the designers and create potential and story opportunities within the world. But thankfully, we've got so many potential scenarios for Fallout and Elder Scrolls for the games, so much opportunity for storytelling, and the way we're building the game it lets you tell your own story as well. I've always loved war games since I was a kid. I remember pulling together a lot of Citadel miniatures that I had. I'd picked up some painted ones from friends who were selling them from a war games bring and buy, and I wanted to tell create battles and tell stories, and I remember building these bigger and bigger armies, and even getting this sort of this old thing called Prince August, which let you mould your own orcs and warriors, and they were awful and I'm not sure it was a good idea letting a kid melt lead on a home hob either, and they all came about a bit blobby, but they kind of served to fill in the ranks. And I would create my own battles, and I wrote my own rules for war games, and we'd moved away from this town where I grew up, and so I was on my own doing a lot of war games, and I'd often create my own rule systems and figure out how to play against myself and create AI systems. So when I grew up taking on something like Fallout and Elder Scrolls, I realised that there's definitely an audience out there who want to play battles against each other, and there's lots of companies that do that really well. And I think what has been missing is the other side of that, which is the ability to play really strong solo games and really strong AI games. And that wasn't the whole picture either, is that there's more that you can do on the tabletop. When I was playing war games as a kid, it was always unbalanced. It was always a bunch of knights with some farmers in a little village, and there was this vast evil horde coming, and they didn't have a chance, but there was the reinforcements coming over the hill, and could they hold on? But there was a cottage over to one side which had a wizard in it. If you could get to the cottage, then you got a really powerful wizard, but did they dare leave the villagers? So there was a story to unfold, and I would always write it up as a narrative. I loved all the old I grew up reading a lot of the old sort of swords and sorcery fantasy books, so I always had this sort of very vivid story going on in my head, and I tried to create mechanics that would interrupt the normal gameplay, that would stop me just fighting, that would give me reasons to do different things. So when we came to develop Fallout and Elder Scrolls, I really wanted to make sure that we weren't just creating a battle game. I mean, sure, you can play a battle, it's really easy, it's points based, and it's great fun, but I wanted another layer on top of that we could offer people. And so the way, for example, Elder Scrolls has been built is that obviously there's this basic set, and then you can choose either of your faction sets, the Imperials or Stormcloaks, or the Bleak Falls Barrow set, which is the Dragonborn and a bunch of Draugr. And that set alone with the base rule set lets you play solo dungeon delving. And when we say dungeon delve, it could be in a dungeon, it could be in the outdoors, on a mission, sort of solo missions, and you can play a whole series of missions with the Dragonborn, gradually recovering relics and treasures and leveling up and fighting your way through this whole series of stories. And that's all well and good as well, but I've I've been working on a couple of products, and one in particular is going to be our first big expansion for Elder Scrolls. And we've learned from Fallout as well that people really enjoyed the storytelling on the tabletop. They enjoyed playing characters and seeing how their missions unfolded. There's a settlement building system with Fallout that lets you gradually build your settlement on paper. And there's a version of that coming where you actually build your actual settlement, and there's a persistent system for characters and leveling up. So we've got this very exciting product coming for Elder Scrolls in the summer, which sees you save a village from being attacked by bandits. You become embroiled in the future of the village for various reasons, which I can't go into. But it's very much it's a campaign that is tied into a quest that is going to unfold as you go on, just any of the other normal missions, but you're going to be able to rebuild the village. You're going to be going off on another mission, perhaps from our Civil War campaign that's coming out. And when you come off one of those missions, you'll roll a dice and check a table to see whether the village got attacked. And the question is, did you leave anyone there to defend the village? Hope so, because otherwise you're in trouble. You have to play out a small defensive action, maybe around one of the farms or one of the ruins. And over the course of what we call various campaign turns, you're going to be rebuilding the village, recruiting more troops, recruiting more heroes, training up your troops to do more interesting stuff, which is going to help you with those campaign actions. So you'll be able to train villagers up to be followers as well, to help in the defense of the village. All the while this is happening, you're discovering more about the area around you. The local Jarl hears about your actions and sends requests, and if you fulfill those requests, that's going to help you. You're going to take on bigger enemies in the local area, threats that keep popping up. Eventually a long a kind of an ancient evil that affected your family is going to return, and then you're going to have to confront that towards the end of the mission. So it's very much a long quest that is wrapped around a number of missions, and we're building in some interesting mechanics into the storyline. So in one of the stories, for example, there'll be a burning farmstead on the table, and if you go in there, you're going to discover something that's quite it's going to distract you a lot, anger you, and that's going to affect your ability to function as a hero for the rest of that mission, but will lead to greater rewards down the line. So there's all sorts of ways we're trying to bring in the story, so you feel like this quest is yours, you feel like you're part of it, that you can suffer and benefit from it. You're going to discover some sort of secrets all the way through the storyline. So it's not just about playing a battle. And I think the rise of co-op and solo board games that you see on Kickstarter is just sort of, I think it's a tip of the iceberg, showing us that there's thousands of people out there that don't get a chance to meet up with their normal gaming group as much as they'd like. Maybe they've got families now, maybe people have just moved apart, and they're crying out for the opportunity to certainly play on their own, but they want to be part of a storyline. And so that's what we're trying to give them with the Elder Scrolls game line. Is this is your chance to be part of the Civil War, to lead your favourite heroes. Maybe it's Hadvar, maybe it's Ralof and Yasserol, Thrice Pierced, or others. Maybe you just want to be the Dragonborn. Maybe a bunch of you just want to, each of you have a hero and go on a series of increasingly complex missions. The great thing with the AI in our games is you can fight anyone. So you could choose to fight the Imperials as AI, and you could raid their camps, you could raid their castles, you could raid their outposts, you could try and take out, rescue some friends from a dungeon. You might be fighting Draugr and Imperials, for example, or vice versa, Stormcloak. So we have a lot of flexibility in the system, and we're constantly developing new products that will help you tell stories in different ways. So I hope you'll come along for the experience and try it out. I think if I could pitch for any project, well, obviously Star Wars is a big one, but it's already been done very well. So other things I love. I mean, I love the Half-Life games. You know, I played Half-Life and followed Gordon Freeman, and then the cop, the security guard, through the various missions, and that was always a big project for me. So doing something with Half-Life would probably be a dream. I'm already doing Star Trek and Fallout and Elder Scrolls, so we've got so many great projects under our hands. Actually, I want to do more of our own projects. We've got a new project called Dreams and Machines that's launching later this year that we've been working on for some time. So actually having more time to work on our own babies is one big dream. So the Elder Scrolls line obviously kicks off with the rule book, the rule box, and the Stormcloaks and the Imperials and the Bleakfall Sparrows set. You're going to get a couple of adventurous sets next that gives you a lot more kind of adventure hero options. And yes, there are different races in that. There's also more expansions there's a proper faction set for the Imperials and Stormcloak coming. And then that comes with the big Civil War campaign book, which is going to give you a whole, I think it's 12 part, might be longer, campaign to play through on either side. There are then Wave 2, we are, it's called the Steam and Shadow chapter. So as you might guess, Shadow is the Dark Brotherhood. So lots of dudes in cloaks with stabby knives and stuff that are going to be awesome because of course there's a big sneak mechanic in this. You've also then got the Dwemer, so we've got some beautiful sculpts of the various Dwemer defenders and that will come with Dwemer scenery as well. We've got some great looking scenery which I've just seen next door, which is there's a Draugr dungeon wall set. There is a Bleakfall Sparrow archers set, so you know the classic archers. So when you match that with these game mats we've got is a double-sided mat, which is Draugr ruins, Nord ruins, or the sort of bleak landscape, snowy landscape on the other side. So it's going to be iconic scenery to use for your gaming. We've got lots of scatter scenery and 3D versions of the various objective markers and treasure chests, which look really cool. So like puzzle boxes and the kind of puzzle stones and levers and all kinds of stuff, which look really good. Beyond that, we're obviously bringing in lots of popular factions. We did a big survey of the community a while back, which got everyone to tell us which of the factions they were most keen on. So we're kind of working our way through the really popular factions, and it's not just Skyrim. We started with Skyrim, but we've got, for example, some of the main heroes from the big cinematic sculpted from the Elder Scrolls Online and Morrowind trailers. We'll be looking at working our way through some of those games as well, much like we are doing with Fallout as well. We're working our way through the other games like Fallout 3, 1 and 2. As I said, there's a kind of big narrative box set coming, which I've been talking about. We've also got another kind of rules expansion later in the year. And of course there will be some pretty big resin things. There is a dragon, he's 3D printed and he looks pretty awesome. So we're going to be doing that as a special order, probably later in the summer as we get closer to the narrative box set. He might be useful in that. Say no more.